Illumi Zoldyck used a needle on himself and has been self-manipulating the entire time we've known him in Hunter x Hunter, up until recently when his true persona has been let loose. There's a reason why Illumi has been this nigh-on emotionless assassin machine, because even in a family just packed with assassins, Illumi is particularly devoid of emotion. Although he is probably the purest manipulator in Hunter x Hunter, rarely if ever splashing into other affinities, and he's always been a pioneer of the field. However, what we're looking at today is quite a simple application of manipulation, which is Illumi's command needle, the one that he inserted into Killua's head in order to make sure that his younger brother stayed alive by giving him a series of fear triggers that stopped Killua stepping into risky situations, which in and of itself is a pretty risky thing to do to the family that you love most in this world. How did Illumi know that this needle was going to have the desired effect? Well, I suspect that Illumi inserted a needle into his own head with its own unique set of commands that has led to Illumi becoming the entity that he is today. If any character in the series has performed a self-lobotomy, it's definitely Illumi. For the vast majority of Hunter x Hunter, Illumi's face is completely blank and devoid of emotion. Meanwhile, his eyes are a flat black curtain obscuring what's happening, if anything is happening backstage. With that said, Togashi's Illumi art is some of my favorite in all of Hunter x Hunter, because he gets weirdly creative with Illumi. One of my favorite panels is this tiny one of Killua thinking about Illumi, who is portrayed as eyes lurking in the darkness. In fact, his eyes are so devoid of life that they match the empty darkness around them. It's the white of the eyes that stands out. But then there's also this beautiful panel of Illumi's face floating in the darkness like a mask in a puppet show. Because regardless of whether or not this is the result of manipulation, that's what this is. A mask hiding something. But Illumi has 3 good reasons to have used the needle ability on himself. But before I reveal those, this video is sponsored by World of Tanks, the free-to-play armored warfare extravaganza where history meets action, available on PC. Something I love about this game is the historical accuracy of the tanks, but also the ability to combine said accuracy with a sense of modern flair. Such as the TVP 50-51 featuring the party wagon Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle camouflage, a stunning, spectacular way of styling all over your assorted opponents. And that's only one of over 800 tanks available for use, meaning that there is always a new way to play, and over 40 fantastic arenas to play in with endless tactical potential to rally your teammates across a vast array of environments. Now, who is this team, you ask? Well, that would be the global World of Tanks community, which is currently sitting at over 100 million players, all harboring the same intense passion to use their big metal things to blow up other big metal things, which admittedly is pretty damn fun. Quite the deal. So you can and should download World of Tanks through my link in the description, and if you're a new player, you can use the invite code COMBAT to get 7 days of premium access, 250,000 credits, the Premium Tank Cromwell B, and 3 rental tanks for 10 battles each. Or if you're a returning player, you'll get 3 days of premium access, the 2D style bargain camouflage, 7 days of rental Premium Tank Centurion Mk 5-1, or 100,000 credit compensation if you already have this tank in your garage. So do that thing, but for now it's back to you, me. The first of which is to become the perfect assassin. It sounds rather counterintuitive, but manipulating oneself is actually quite the crafty solution to eliminate human error in highly sensitive professions, and it's also quite common. Manipulation is often categorized as an end user taking control of another person or object. Most people don't look beyond this capability because it's the simplest win condition, just take control of your opponent. Well, what else do you need? But often that isn't an option, and even when it is, it's not always the best option. And so Hunter x Hunter has quite the rich history of self-manipulation. In fact, many of the world's greatest manipulators have a technique that they use on themselves in dicey situations. The most clear-cut example of this would be Shinnok's autopilot function. Shinnok is a natural manipulator, and his Hatsu black voice grants him 2 antennae that he can stick into people to control. However, Shinnok can also stick one into himself and activate autopilot on his mobile device, and then input a mission command, which results in the Hunter x Hunter equivalent of a Super Saiyan style transformation, boosting Shinnok's aura, speed, strength, and all of the everything, and is probably the most potent example of self-manipulation because Shinnok becomes practically unstoppable in combat. If this had been active when Hisoka was trying to kill him, then Hisoka could not have killed him. This is due to the conditions that autopilot will not stop until the mission is complete, but as a cost to that, it leaves Shinnok exhausted for a few days after use. So high risk, high reward. But self-manipulation is also a great way to counter other manipulators, because you can only be controlled by one person at a time. so you may as well get in early and make sure that the person who's controlling you is you. To a lesser extent, we can look at the manipulator Zazan as well. Her basic ability is called Queen Shot, which she uses to inject and take control of assorted slaves. However, she can also inject herself to become super strong. That's a much more raw example, but she's still manipulating her own body and abilities. And this concept isn't restricted to manipulators either. Killua, whilst he is a transmuter, has also managed to dip into self-manipulation through the whirlwind function of Godspeed. In this mode, Killua foregoes the comparatively slow process of the nervous system and allows his aura to instantly control his muscles to respond to different stimuli, which gives him the ability to move faster than even a Chimera Ant-Royal Guard, and really at a pace that no one could keep up with unless they had a comparative ability that removes the nervous system. Like Shinnok in Autopilot versus Killua in Whirlwind would be one of the greatest fights you could ever witness. It would be like watching two high-functioning AI Nenbots go at one another. To be clear, what Killua is doing here isn't manipulation, it's transmutation, but it has the same desired effect as self-manipulation. It takes away Killua's personal agency in Whirlwind, and so the effect ends up being very similar. Even Illumi has self-manipulated. In fact, Illumi's self-manipulation is one of the very first uses of Nen we see in this series through his body morphing. However, I think it would be mad to assume that someone as cold and logical as Illumi Zoldyck hasn't at least considered the possibility of making himself more efficient. It's almost Nen malpractice not to be taking advantage of this. And as it stands, Illumi is the ultimate emotionless, efficient assassin, and I don't think he achieved that through principle alone. The idea of Illumi issuing himself a series of commands is a much more efficient use of Nen than Shinnok's over-the-top autopilot or Killua's rapidly depleting Godspeed. In Illumi's case, it would just be a series of bodily laws designed to keep Illumi on the path of an assassin. But work isn't all there is to Illumi. In a bizarre twist, the Zoldyck family is actually one of the most loving family units in this entire world. Killua's family care for him a hell of a lot more than, say, Jing cares about Gon, and Illumi especially feels that family drive. He genuinely loves Killua and doesn't want to see any harm come to him. However, it very much steps into the realm of disturbing, as noted by Bisky. Killua's guardians were overprotective. It probably comes from loving him too much. It's an abnormal, obsessive, distorted love. And we also have a visual example of said distorted love. In chapter 326, Illumi has a very uncharacteristic snap of emotion when Hisoka playfully asks if he can kill Killua. In this moment, all of Illumi's inhibitors are released, and he becomes a monster ready to mercilessly devour Hisoka, all for the sake of protecting his brother. So this is explained as a protection of Ren because they go on to speak about how silly Illumi was being here, accidentally spilling his bloodlust all over the place and alerting Killua to his presence. But that in and of itself is noteworthy because Illumi doesn't tend to use Ren. It's too aggressive and it's like setting off a fire alarm. It's not at all befitting of the subtleties of an assassin. It's usually reserved for people like Hisoka who actively try to make themselves a target. And when the Zoldicks do use Ren, it's generally to act as a distraction, such as when Silver projected his Ren towards Crollo in order to give Zeno an opportunity to hit him during York New City. But I'm much more interested in the sudden shift of a previously completely emotionless person. It's as if Illumi was programmed with some sort of command set to trigger if his family were ever in danger, which is another potential reason to needle himself, to make sure that Illumi always responds in a quick, decisive manner to any external threat, in a manner befitting of course, obsessive, distorted love. But then again, we've examined Illumi's profession, we've examined his feelings towards his family, but what we still have yet to do is examine Illumi himself. What does Illumi want? The only time we've seen Illumi display what I'd call real emotion is chapter 333 when Killua asks Nanika to heal Gon. The Illumi we see in this moment is different from the character we saw before, as well as the character we saw after. And not only that, but Illumi even expressed a desire. He said, "Amazing. I want this power above all else. Nanika is mine." This isn't just uncharacteristic, it's like a completely different character has stepped into Illumi's body. But this is the real Illumi. An insatiable, power-hungry individual who wants to abandon his work in the shadows to pursue something far greater than humanity can imagine, which is quite the lofty ambition for a very good, prim and proper murder boy. And that's precisely why Illumi may have sought to seal that away. The needle could be a way of Illumi toning himself down, to keep his power lust in check, which in turn would keep his family safe. Because Illumi's true desires are, simply maniacal, and he is smart enough to realize that. So the needle may not have any specific commands designed to assist with the art of assassination, but it may be intended to dull down or even outright remove Illumi's emotions and sense of desire. But the question then would become, well, if that were true, then how did we see this desire here? And that would be because Illumi's needle is not infallible, indestructible, or uncontrollable. It can be degraded or broken, decision either by the will of the target or by outside force. In Killua's case, this was quite the hard-fought process initiated by Bisky. She was able to detect the needle, but couldn't outright state that Killua was under Illumi's control. So she dropped him a continuous set of hints and referred to the ability as a quote, bad habit that will be hard to break. And it was only after being confronted with a situation where Gon's life was in immediate danger that Killua was pushed into taking that final step. And a similar thing could have happened with Illumi. His emotions and desire were sedated, but his mind and body began to respond to Nanika's power, which degraded the needle's influence. And when Nanika healed Gon, that was the greatest use of that power to date, which may have released Illumi from his own spell. It's very hard to stay in check when you are confronted with exactly what it is you want, and that thing is, it's so overwhelming. And this state endured when Illumi confronted Killua in the hospital afterwards. When Illumi presented his theory to Killua, he is smiling. And that one simple facial gesture is infinitely more than Illumi would normally show in any situation. It's as if this Illumi has been liberated, and for better or worse, what we're seeing is the real Illumi for the first time. And he proceeds to do something very curious, which is to try and bargain with Killua. He tries to convince Killua that Hulka's only option to get any freedom is with him, which is weird. Illumi does not bargain, Illumi commands. Because the Illumi we knew before, the cold, efficient assassin machine, doesn't waste any time accomplishing the mission. Bargaining is a waste of time. However, Illumi's expressiveness does tone down the next time we see him aboard the Black Whale 1 after having joined the Phantom Troop. There are still quite a few oddities about him, which ended up leading to the infamous Illumi is Hisoka in disguise theory. Before we actually saw Hisoka aboard the ship in the latest batch of chapters, before that happened, it was widely speculated that this was not Illumi because he exhibits a lot of very Hisoka-like behaviors, many of them getting lost in translation. For example, in Japanese, there's about a million different ways to say the word I, as in me, I, not I, with each one indicating something about your status and personality. And throughout Hunter x Hunter, Illumi uses the pronoun ore, which is considered quite rude and to the point, whereas Hisoka uses boku, which is usually what young boys would adopt and has a much more playful, youthful evocation. But rather bizarrely, ever since his reappearance aboard the Black Whale 1, Illumi has abandoned ore and started referring to himself as boku. He's also become a lot more, how shall we say, frivolous in conversation in general, often stating unnecessary details and even asking Mizaistom for a room with a shower. I know these things seem minor, but remember, this is Illumi. This is the dude who was happy to fall asleep in a dirt hole, so there's definitely something off about him in the current arc. It should be noted that the Hisoka is Illumi theory isn't 100% dead, because we did find Hisoka on tier 3 of the Black Whale 1, which is where both Illumi and Kabuto were. However, the theory is much less likely. Although I would say that if Hisoka were Illumi, then it's more than likely that Kabuto is already dead after having been left alone with him. But accepting that this is Illumi, which again, it's the likely outcome, then that could imply something even more sinister, which is that we are now living in an age of an uninhibited Illumi. Whatever was holding him back before, be it something as simple as responsibility or something more complicated like a commandable Nen needle, whatever it is, it's no longer there. If this is Illumi, then his personality has changed, his goals have changed, his rules of engagement have changed, and we could have yet another huge complication to deal with during the Succession War. And thanks so much again to World of Tanks for sponsoring this video, and you can join the fun for free through my link in the description.